Hey, welcome back to the podcast, the Evil Dungeon Master Universe podcast. I'm your host, Evil Dungeon Master Vince. Hopefully, you're doing well. It's Friday. Weekend is upon us, and gaming is upon us too, as well. Where most people game on the weekends. I know I do. I got two games this weekend, to be honest. One of them is a GURPS game, GI Joe GURPS. I'm playing in it, which I'm excited to play in, and the other game is my Mini Six Supernatural Hunters game I'm running. So I got an action-packed Saturday of gaming for myself, starting at around I think 1 p.m., going all the way up until like 7 or 8. So I should have a great day in between games, a little break, whatever, and have some fun and see what happens. I like gaming weekends, so hopefully you do too. So today's topic is kind of inspired by what none other than an office argument between coworkers. I have a lot of people in my office that play D&D. So we often will talk about Dungeons and Dragons, sci-fi things, TV shows, superhero stuff to pass the day along. One of the conversations skewed towards Dungeons and Dragons. It's normal we talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and they know I'm an older edition player. They know I play AD&D. Sometimes I'll play 3E or Pathfinder, but they know I do not play 5th edition. And I have my reasons, and they respect that. Just like I respect that they play the game, and, we get along just fine. That's how it should be. You play your edition, you enjoy what you want, and no one should tell you anything otherwise. But anyway, we got into a conversation about hit points and death and dying. And they were saying, well, in older editions, once you hit 0, you were dead. Well, that's not necessarily true, I told them. There is some rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide that tells you otherwise, and they're like, no, it's 0 for AD&D. I've read the book. Did you read the book? Really? Did you read the book? No, apparently they did not, because I had to get the PDF on my phone and show them what I was talking about on page 82 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, which goes into hit points, but specifically 0 hit points. And this is where the -10 rule comes into effect for AD&D that most people learn to play with without even realizing why they're playing with it. And it's got some interesting little rules inside of it that I really like now that I've reread it. I knew you can go to -10, and I've used that, and I've used it to the point of, if you're negatives, until you get to -10, you're dead. And once you get a potion, you can pop back up. No, that is not the case at all whatsoever. So here's what it says on page 82. It's only 3 paragraphs long, but it's quite impactful when it comes to the gameplay. When any creature is brought to 0 hit points, optionally as low as -3 hit points if from the same blow which brought the total to 0, it is unconscious. In each next succeeding one additional negative hit point will be lost until -10 is reached and the creature dies. Such loss and death are caused from bleeding, shock, convulsions, non-respiration, and similar causes. It causes immediately on any round a friendly creature. It ceases immediately on any round if a friendly creature administers aid to the unconscious one. Aid consists of binding wounds, starting respiration, administering a drought, such as a spirit, a healing potion, etc., a palm, whatever you can think of, or otherwise doing whatever is necessary to restore life. Notice you don't need a skill for this or a roll for this. You just have to administer it and take your turn doing so. Any character brought to 0 or fewer hit points and then revive will remain in a coma for 1 to 6 turns. So anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour, you could be in a coma, which is fine. At least you're not dead, right? Therefore, he or she must rest for a full week minimum. He or she will be incapable of any activity other than that necessary to move slowly to a place of rest and sleep when they land there. So Basically, you're in a coma for at least an hour. Well, I mean, at least 10 minutes and then up to an hour. Once you wake from that coma, you are able to move very slowly at I would say like a very slow crawl, maybe with the help of a party member holding you up to some place that you can go to rest. So think of the hero in the movies when he's going to fight and he's going for the big battle, but he's really not ready for that big battle just yet. And he gets his ass just beat everywhere for the game. For the battle, but he doesn't die. The whatever the villain or the monster leaves him. His partner, who was not capable of fighting, comes up, picks up the hero, drags him to and over the shoulder, kind of guides him to the campground where the next week he spends bandaged up and resting, getting his health back. So there's that. Let's see here. So you can't carry anything, you can't run, you can't study, you can't research, you can't really do anything but rest, sleep, same thing, eat food, and heal. That's it. Just natural healing for the next week. Let's see here. This is true even if a cure spell or healing potions are given to him or her. Although if a healing spell is bestowed, and heal is the heal spell, the prohibition no longer applies. So if your cleric comes over to you and touches you with a cure light wounds, for example, and puts you back into the positive, you still are considered down and out for at least a week, regardless, according to what this is saying. You went into the negative, you're suffering those consequences of being bashed around and beaten badly. It's just like if a doctor administers, it doesn't really make any sense to us. The doctor administers medicine on you, maybe the symptoms will go away briefly, but you have to go and rest for a while before everything comes back to you. Not really a great example, but you understand what I'm saying. The heal spell, because it's in italics, which means the heal spell itself, will bypass all that and bring you back to normal without that 1 week of minimum rest that you need. Now, it goes on further. If a creature reaches a state of -6 or greater negative points before being revived, this could indicate scarring or the loss of some member, if you so choose, if you want, as a DM. For example, a character struck by a fireball and then treated with a negative, and treated when get a tongue twisted this morning. If he's struck by a fireball and then hit with -9 and then gets treated, he might have horrible scar tissue on exposed areas of his flesh, hand, arms, neck, or face. You could go as far as doing, maybe he burnt off something at -9. Maybe he lost a hand. Maybe he lost an eye. Maybe he lost a foot. Who knows? It's really up to you, the DM. When it gets into the negative territory, there's no repercussion as far as -6. When it gets to -6 or greater, I should say get -5, you're fine. You just basically have to rest based on at least a week or two, depending on how far down you get. When you get to -6 or greater, it's kind of when the DM can start imposing complications to you. Maybe they could put some type of loss of limb, like it says, and depending on the situation, they could give you some type of mental issue going on because maybe you have some PSTT, PSD, PSTD. God, I can't talk today. It's early in the morning, excuse me, folks. But anyway, maybe they can give you something like that. Maybe they can give you some type of tick. There's plenty of things in here. You can even go look at the Palladium book for different things what happens when people are in coma, which is a perfect book to use that I quite often will use from Palladium Fantasy when it comes to those things, giving characters some weird ticks and things like that. You can do that to make sure that they have some interesting flaw on their character now they went that far. Now, of course, as a DM, you could just be like 0 dead, boom, like they do in Basic, or BX is just dead. But what fun is that? And I honestly like this 0 hit points I don't know. Is it optional rule? Because it's a rule in the book. Obviously, yeah, I know. Books are guidelines. Something you always say, Vince. Books are guidelines. You rule the book, not the other way around. But when it comes to something like this, it's interesting to me to see and look at it all these years later. Was Gary like, here's an optional rule? Or is Gary saying this is the rule? I'm reading it as it's in between because he says optionally as low as, but it says when you're brought to 0 hit points, and that whole line is in what is it, parentheses, is unconscious, and then it talks about negative hit points until negative 10 is reached. So you can interpret it how you want. You're the dungeon master when it comes to playing this game and running this game. Your world, your rules, your story. You rule this how you want, and I'm thinking negative 10 is right. And I've been doing it right all this time, and all the people are like, no, you did it 0, are absolutely wrong. And you're thinking of basic D&D, which is for babies. I still remember that back in the 80s when we were playing D&D, when they had basic D&D and they had advanced, and they had that whole advertisement. Advanced is for the more advanced player of Dungeons and Dragons, and adults play advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I was just like, and only babies play basic D&D. It's funny how geeks to torture one another and stuff like that. But yeah. So yeah, I've been playing it right. Negative 10 has always been the correct thing. I just never implemented the recovery part of it when it comes to how long you were in a coma because of whatever. I like the idea of it. I think I'm going to implement this whole system into my basic fantasy game because I don't think there's a rule for death and dying in basic fantasy. So I think I'm going to implement this whole 0 hit point structure into it. And I like the fact that you have to rest for a week or so. I definitely want to modify this a little bit for the game because we have a pretty large party. So I don't want to necessarily keep a character in a coma for a week while the rest of the party stands around picking their nose. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, tell me what you think about 0 hit points, and should the character die at 0 hit points, or do they die at negative 10 hit points? Or do you have some other type of thing? I've heard some people do it as once you get negative constitution, that's when you die. So if your constitution is 10, negative 10. If your constitution is 6, negative 6. If it's 18, negative 18. I've heard and seen DMs do that. So it's really up to the dungeon master how he wants to handle it. But I want to know how you handle it in the comments. Tell me below. Write in. Support me at ko-fi.com/evilDM, where you will get anything that I'm pretty much writing for free as a supporter, I believe, at the second tier. I'm also doing a newsletter once a month for them. And I'm probably going to be doing a podcast. I've already started episode 1, a podcast for Ko-Fi members only. I believe it'll be about once a month or something. I'll be talking about things I'm doing, things in life. It's a general update thing for me. First episode's up, and people have enjoyed it so far, so hopefully you will enjoy it too. With that said, I'm going to head out. Keep it original, keep it old school. Good night. God bless, and we'll keep praying for you.